The Art of Being Ruled. Wyndham Lewis. Original publication 1926. 1989 edition. Narrated by Skeptical Waves. Part 1. Revolution and Progress. Chapter 4. The Phantom Man of Democratic Enlightenment. Intimately associated with the notion of revolution is the notion of progress. The origin of this latter notion is traced by George Sorel to the rise of monarchy in Europe. In his very interesting book on this subject, Les Illusions du Progrès, Sorel starts by indicating the generally accepted theory which places the origin of the idea of progress in the quarrel of the moderns and the classicists occurring in the last years of the 17th century. He justly remarks how strange or paradoxical it must seem to anyone today that a literary quarrel could have engendered such an idea. For no one today would be disposed to admit the existence of progress where art is concerned. In the one activity that in most ways is accepted from the system of mechanical betterment applied to everything else, this very idea is said to have had its origin. Nothing seems to us more strange, he says, than the bad taste of Perrault systematically claiming for his contemporaries a higher place than that accorded to the great men of the Renaissance or of antiquity, preferring, for example, Le Brun to Raphael. Brunetière, whom Sorel largely follows, believed that the idea of progress originated in two Cartesian theses relative to science: 1. That science is never separated from practice, and 2. That science goes on indefinitely growing. Indeed, from an acceptance of these two theses Sorel admits it would be natural to proceed, in applying them to the political or social world, to the belief in an indefinite progress for society too. But he prefers to reverse this explanation, in a sense. When the notion of progress first took shape, the political world was of such very great importance, and the idea of the monarchy enjoyed such great prestige, that it is more likely, he thinks, that the idea of progress came from a contemplation of the kingly power, rather than from the notions of the stability of natural laws popularized by Fontenelle. The governments of the new monarchical model, even in the time of Descartes, with their centralized power and regular administration, could give effect, with great exactitude, to all their wishes. They could realize the stipulated physical union, in fact, of theory and practice. The grandiose dreams of the political primitives of Italy of the Machiavellian type had become astonishing realities. The kingly power, in its culmination in such a figure as that of La Roi Soleil, dazzled everybody so much, its success seemed so stable and assured, and it seemed automatically increasing with the predictable acceleration of a law of nature, that it must have been from that, rather than from the new triumphs of natural science, that men got their idea of progress. Sorel even suggests that Galileo perhaps derived his interest in the laws of gravitational acceleration from the type of constant force presented by the monarchy, with its power swelling under his eyes every day. Instead of the gay, enlightened notion of progress coming to birth in the 18th century aristocratic world, such people as George Sorel or Lenin would have a gravity and pessimism much nearer to the religious mind than to the light-hearted, secular, pagan European. Their way of envisaging the problems that the idea of progress was invented to meet would imply a static conception of the world, or the world's mind, rather than a scientific and evolutionary one. Their progress would be a discipline and adjustment. Nor would it admit the whole, unregenerate human family on equal terms, as a jolly party of friends, with the humbug ensuing from such a notion. In the contemplation of a partly latent political power, beside which the power of a Louis XIV would seem indeed a pygmy, rather than in science, a Galileo today could find support, no doubt, for even more formidable physical laws. Bound up with the idea of progress is the democratic conception of a social unification. It is this idea of unification inseparable from democracy that Sorel, the syndicalist, is principally concerned to attack and if possible destroy. Democracy has for its principal object, both according to the revolutionary school to which Sorel belonged, and equally according to Leninism, the disappearance of the class feeling. Its idea is to mix all the citizens of a given society into one whole, in which the most intelligent would automatically better themselves and rise, by their talents, into the higher ranks. Such social climbing would be of the essence of this democratic society. The real social classes are, for the syndicalist, occupational classes or syndics, of course. Class in the bourgeois sense is an abstract abomination. In following for a little the main line of the syndicalist, we shall be arriving at one of the most interesting critical points where class is concerned in recent socialism. At the bottom of the syndicalist idea is the wish for a caste system. This is not explicit in the syndicalist doctrine, nor is, I had better add, much of the interpretation I am about to provide. Europe has had classes, Asia castes. The free European has always been a gentleman for himself, through all his intermittent slavery. His power of self-deception has been very remarkable, all the realities of hard labor and subordination were replaced by a rosy abstraction of freedom. Nosotros somos todos caballeros aquí. Mixing his chivalry with his democracy, he would exclaim. Syndicalism is non-European in that sense. It would aim at breaking up this abstract dream, and abstract classification based on the unreality of freedom. Against the finished product of scientific popularization, syndicalism also raised itself. This neat, simplified, abstracted truth, prepared for the democracy, it regarded as pernicious. It is that abstract machinery that manufactures the abstract man of democracy, the great European make-believe. The bourgeoisie who seized the power at the revolution concocts this abstraction now. Before, it was the aristocratic salon who concocted it, or had it concocted. And by means of it the bourgeoisie imposes its galb on the mind of the worker, so that he becomes a little bourgeois. But democratic ideals hold up to the workman images of a life that is not his, and to which he can never belong. He remains an eternal spectator. Other people, the bourgeoisie, act his life for him, out of reach. He has no imaginative life of his own. For this up and down, this higher and lower, this betterment of progress and democratic snobbery, with its necessary unification into a whole, suppressing of differences and substituting for them an arbitrary scale of values, with the salon at the top, the syndicalist would substitute an equally dogmatic egalitarian this and that, a horizontal diversity. If you are a pro-specialist to the extent that the syndicalist is, you will naturally not regard the phenomenon of vulgarization with favor. This abstract of truth or knowledge, this thin miniature pretended cosmos, oversimplified till it becomes meaningless, is a self-indulgent pretense not worth having. It makes a society of little sham gods, or know-alls. J. Say tout is the name of one of their organs. Everyone in this sense becomes a phantom man, namely l'homme éclairé. This homme éclairé is nothing at all. He is not a bootmaker, an engineer, a carpenter, or a doctor. He is a man of fashion really, if he is anything, a man of conversation. And his habitat is the salon or fashionable, and at the same time intellectual, dinner table. What has the hard-working country doctor, the busy engineer or bootmaker, to do with this strange figure of aristocratic leisure, senseless curiosity and loquacity? Nothing at all. Then why be vulgarized in that way, as though you were he and not yourself? The cultural, all-round personage, the ideal of the vulgarizer and of democracy, is the opposite of the narrow classman, or better, caste man, the narrow occupational mannequin, the narrow integral self-effaced unit of the syndic. The bootmaker, for the theorist of syndicalism, must have only bootmaking thoughts. No godlike, éclairé, gentlemanly thoughts must interfere with his pure, sutorial one-sidedness, thoughts that in any case he would get all upside down, never have any time to properly enjoy, and which would only make him absurd and diminish his utility, whereas, sticking to his last, he could be as noble as any noble, the nobility of toil, a figure like a Sistine prophet, at his best. Contrasted with him, the courtier skipping nimbly in a lady's chamber to the lascivious pleasing of a lute is far less grand, infinitely less to be respected or admired. The majority of men should, and indeed must, be screwed down and locked up in their functions. They must be functional specialists, the doctor smelling of drugs, the professor blue-spectacled, bent, and powdered with snuff, the miner covered with coal dust, the soldier stiff and martial, etc., etc. The only person who can be an all-round man, éclairé, full of skepticism, wide general knowledge, and lights is the ruler, and he must be that is his specialization. This is naturally not the way that the syndicalist puts it. But it is what is implied in the political system of Sorel and the other syndicalists. Now, if we were dealing in dreams, in impossible people instead of people as they are found in their daily life, we could argue with success, perhaps, against the syndicalists that people are happier when they are, although nailed down to their technical occupation, imagining themselves something they are not. It is perhaps in the Madame Bovary in everybody that is to be found the true source of human happiness. People like to have a dream or hope, to think they can rise in the world, become a bourgeois gentilhomme, or even perhaps, with very great luck indeed, a little noble. If you told them that this was very absurd and snobbish, they would perhaps reply that it was no more absurd than anything else in life, than remaining boxed down, for instance, in the specializations of some trade. Most men, again, do not really love their shop so much that they never want to get out of it. In this way you could represent this abstract region of useless but enlightened, skeptical, romance, to which democratic vulgarization admitted everybody, as the organization of a happiness that is a permanent, invariable factor in the human makeup. The gentleman, the superb, unreal invention of the European, might seem worth preserving. It might even seem that the European must sink politically when he gave it up. If people needed discipline less than they do, not more, if they were not so disposed to take advantage of these godlike conditions offered, even, only vicariously, and all wanted to be gods more than the resources of human life, and the patience or jealousy of men, will support, and so on with the tale of the reality of life and human nature, then, perhaps, these arguments would be true. But unfortunately they cannot meet these hostile requirements, forced on everyone by experience.